May 12, 2005. A yellow school bus pulls out of Jefferson High at 8:05 a.m. 23 students, 1 teacher. A wetland reserve 41 miles south. 12 years later, volunteer divers find the front half of that bus in 7 feet of water, 7 miles from where it was supposed to be. Mrs. Angela Brennan stands in the parking lot that morning, clipboard in hand. She counts heads twice. The bus driver, a substitute named Carl Hoffner, checks his mirrors and pulls onto State Route 135. The day is clear. Temperature 58 degrees. The reserve expects them at 9:15 a.m. At 8:19 a.m., a gas station clerk in Corydon sells Carl a coffee and a county map. Carl asks about County Road 9. The clerk says it's closed for resurfacing. Carl nods and folds the map. 14 minutes later, the bus passes mile marker 27 on SR 135. A traffic camera catches the yellow roof moving south at 41 miles per hour. Then, the bus disappears. Mrs. Brennan calls the school at 10:03 a.m. She says they're back, all students accounted for. The reserve was educational. She submits a trip report. Arrival 9:22 a.m., departure 2:41 p.m., return to school 3:48 p.m., no incidents. But 3 students, Ethan Cole, Maya Suresh, and Jacob Lindstrom, tell their parents something different that night. They say the bus never reached the reserve. They say Carl took a detour. They say they saw water rising over the road. The school dismisses it as confusion. Kids mixing up details. The trip report is filed. But in 2017, a diver named Garrett Mills is searching for a missing fishing boat in Maple Lake when his sonar picks up something large and angular 12 feet below the surface. Garrett surfaces and radios the county. He says it looks like a vehicle. The sheriff's office sends a team. They drop cameras. The water is murky. Visibility 120 feet on a good day, 40 feet today. The cameras catch yellow paint. A rounded front, headlights caked in algae. Garrett goes down again. He runs his gloved hand along the side. He finds the number. Bus 447. Jefferson High's fleet records confirm it. That bus was retired in 2006 and sold to a salvage yard in Louisville. The yard has no record of it arriving. Garrett prees open the driver's side door. Silt clouds the water. He waits. When it clears, he sees the steering wheel, the gear shift, and a thermos wedged under the seat. He pulls it free. The metal is corroded, but the bottom is still legible. A piece of masking tape with C. Hoffner, written in blue ink. On the dashboard, beneath a layer of sediment, he finds a torn piece of paper. The ink is smeared, but 3 words are readable. Detour. County Road 9. The county pulls the case file. On May 12, 2005, County Road 9 was closed from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. for asphalt work. Barricades at both ends. No vehicles permitted. But Carl's handwriting is on that paper, and his thermos is in that bus. And that bus is in a lake 7 miles west of the route to the reserve. The sheriff calls Mrs. Brennan. She's retired now, living in Bloomington. She remembers the trip clearly. She insists they arrived at the reserve on time. She shows him photos. Students gathered around a pond, holding clipboards, wearing name tags. The timestamp reads 9:34 a.m. The location data embedded in the image file confirms it. Coordinates match the reserve. The sheriff calls Ethan Cole. Ethan is 26 now, working as a surveyor in Indianapolis. He remembers the trip differently. He says the bus turned off SR 135 around 8:40 a.m. He says Carl muttered something about a shortcut. He says they drove on gravel for 20 minutes. He says the road dipped and water started pooling around the tires. He says Mrs. Brennan told everyone to stay calm. He says they got off the bus and walked through shallow water back to the main road. He says a van picked them up, a church van, white, no markings. He says they arrived at the reserve just before noon. The sheriff calls Maya Suresh. She's in med school in Chicago. Her story matches Ethan's almost exactly. She adds one detail. She remembers Carl trying to reverse the bus, but the wheels spun in mud. She remembers him saying, "We're stuck." She remembers Mrs. Brennan making a call on her cell phone. 14 minutes later, the van arrived. The sheriff calls Jacob Lindstrom. Jacob is a teacher now, in Fort Wayne. He confirms the detour. He confirms the water. He confirms the van. But he adds something else. He says when they walked away from the bus, he looked back. He says the water was rising fast. He says the front of the bus was already half submerged. He says Mrs. Brennan told them not to talk about it. The sheriff pulls phone records from May 12, 2005. Mrs. Brennan's cell shows one outgoing call at 8:52 a.m. Duration, 4 minutes, 11 seconds. The number belongs to a landline, registered to Vincent Chapel, a small church 11 miles west of Maple Lake. The church secretary, now 71, remembers the call. She says Mrs. Brennan sounded stressed. She says the church van driver, a volunteer named Tom Rucker, left immediately. She says he returned 90 minutes later. She says he told her he'd picked up a school group whose bus broke down. She says he never mentioned water or a lake. Tom Rucker died in 2011. His family finds his day planner in a storage box. The entry for May 12, 2005 reads 8:55 a.m. pickup at CR9 Junction. School bus stuck. 23 kids plus teacher drove to Wetland Reserve, returned 3 p.m. Below that, in smaller handwriting, bus sinking. Carl stayed to wait for tow. The sheriff searches for Carl Hoffner. The school's HR file lists him as a substitute driver, hired for 1 week in May 2005. His application includes a local address and a phone number. The address is an apartment complex that was demolished in 2009. The phone number is disconnected. His driver's license, issued in April 2005, shows an expiration date of July 15, 2005, valid for 90 days. Expires 64 days after the field trip. The state checks its database. No renewal. No death certificate. No forwarding address. Carl Hoffner vanishes from every system on May 13, 2005. The sheriff sends a team to the lake. They bring pumps and cables. It takes 6 hours to lift the front half of the bus onto the shore. The rear half is gone, sheared off cleanly just behind the front axle. The metal edges are jagged, but not torn. They look cut. The team searches the lake bed for the rest of the bus. They find nothing. Inside the front section they find mud, algae, and 12 pairs of sneakers lined up on the floor behind the driver's seat. The shoes are small, student sizes. Each pair has a name written on the tongue in permanent marker: Ethan Cole, Maya Surish, Jacob Lindstrom, and 9 others. The forensic team photographs every shoe. They match the names to the class roster, all present. But Mrs. Brennan's trip report lists 23 students. 12 pairs of shoes means 24 shoes. 24 shoes means 12 students left their shoes on that bus. The sheriff calls the other students from that trip. Most remember the reserve. Most remember the pond and the clipboards. 3 more remember the detour. They remember the water. They remember the van. But none of them remember leaving their shoes behind. The forensic team tests the shoes. The mud inside matches sediment samples from Maple Lake. The algae growth suggests the shoes were submerged for at least 10 years. But every student the sheriff interviews insists they wore their shoes home that day. The team finds one more item in the bus: a laminated card tucked into the sun visor. It's a toll road receipt. The timestamp reads May 12, 2005, 7:41 a.m. The location is a toll plaza on Interstate 64, 63 miles northwest of Jefferson High. The bus was photographed by the plaza camera at that time. The image shows Carl in the driver's seat. The passenger seat is empty. The bus is empty. No students, no teacher. Just Carl, alone, heading southeast toward Jefferson High. The sheriff stares at the timeline. If Carl was at the toll plaza at 7:41 a.m., 63 miles away, He would have needed to average 94 miles per hour to reach the school by 7:58 a.m. The bus's governor limits it to 65 miles per hour. The math doesn't work. The forensic team examines the thermos again. Inside, they find dried coffee residue. The lab tests it. The coffee contains a sedative, chloral hydrate, a compound used in the 1990s for pre-surgical relaxation. The concentration is low, not enough to cause unconsciousness, just enough to cause mild disorientation and memory suppression. The team tests the shoes. Trace amounts of the same compound on the insoles. The sheriff brings Mrs. Brennan back in. He shows her the thermos. He shows her the toll receipt. He shows her the shoes. She stares at them for a long time. Then she says, "I remember now." She says Carl handed out small paper cups of juice at 8:30 a.m. She says it was warm for May, and he thought the kids needed hydration. She says most of them drank it. She says she drank some too. She says after that, her memory gets hazy. She says the next clear thing she remembers is standing at the reserve with her clipboard, checking off names. The sheriff asks if she remembers the detour. She closes her eyes. She says she remembers gravel crunching under the tires. She remembers Carl's voice saying, "Shortcut." She remembers water creeping up the bus steps. She remembers telling the kids to take off their shoes so they wouldn't get wet. She remembers them walking single file through ankle-deep water. She remembers the white van. She remembers Carl staying behind. She remembers Tom Rucker saying, "Don't worry, he'll get help." She remembers arriving at the reserve and feeling like no time had passed. The sheriff asks why she filed a report saying everything was normal. She says she doesn't know. She says it felt normal. She says the photos prove it was normal. The sheriff shows her the photo again, the one with the students around the pond. He points to the timestamp, 9:34 a.m. He points to the shadows. He says the sun angle is wrong for 9:34 a.m. in May. He says the shadows suggest early afternoon. He says the photo was taken at least 3 hours later than the metadata claims. The team examines the camera. It's a digital point-and-shoot, common in 2005. The metadata can be manually adjusted in the settings. Someone changed the timestamp before the photo was taken. The sheriff asks Mrs. Brennan if she changed it. She says no. She says Carl borrowed her camera that morning to take a picture of the bus. She says he handed it back to her at the reserve. She says she didn't check the settings. The forensic team finds one more clue in the bus. A plastic bottle cap wedged between the driver's seat and the door frame. The cap is from a brand of spring water, sold at gas stations in southern Indiana. The lot number on the cap matches a batch distributed in May 2005. The team contacts the distributor. The batch was delivered to 42 gas stations. One of them is the Corydon station where Carl bought his coffee. The clerk's receipt shows Carl purchased a coffee at 8:19 a.m. There's no record of a water bottle, but the cap is in the bus. The sheriff reviews the station's security tape from that morning. The footage is grainy but clear enough. Carl enters at 8:18 a.m. He buys a coffee and a map. He leaves at 8:21 a.m. The camera catches him walking back to the bus. He's carrying the coffee in his right hand. His left hand is in his jacket pocket. The sheriff freezes the frame. There's a bulge in the pocket. The shape is consistent with a water bottle. The team tests the bottle cap for prints. They find a partial match in the state database. But the name isn't Hoffner. The print belongs to a man named Gerald Prine, arrested in 2003 for insurance fraud involving staged vehicle accidents. He served 18 months and was released in April 2005. His last known address is in Jeffersonville, 14 miles from Jefferson High. The sheriff pulls his photo from the DMV. He shows it to the gas station clerk. The clerk studies it. He says, "That could be the guy who bought the map." The sheriff shows him Carl's substitute driver application photo. The clerk says, "They look similar." The sheriff overlays the two images. The bone structure matches. Gerald Prine and Carl Hoffner are the same person. The sheriff pulls Gerald's case file. In 2003, Gerald was caught orchestrating fake accidents on rural roads. He would disable a vehicle, wait for a passerby to stop and help, then claim the passerby caused additional damage. He filed 17 insurance claims over 2 years. The fraud was discovered when one victim installed a dashcam. Gerald was convicted and sent to county jail. His cellmate, according to jail records, was a man named Thomas Rucker Jr., son of the church van driver. Thomas was serving 90 days for check fraud. He was released 3 weeks before Gerald. The sheriff contacts Thomas Rucker Jr. Thomas is 49 now, living in Louisville. He remembers Gerald. He says Gerald talked constantly about one more big job. He says Gerald was obsessed with school buses because they carried high insurance values. He says Gerald believed he could stage a bus accident, file a massive claim, and disappear. Thomas says he told his father about Gerald as a joke. He says his father, Tom Rucker Sr., said it was a terrible idea. But Thomas admits he gave Gerald his father's church phone number. He says Gerald asked for a reliable contact in case of emergency. The sheriff asks why Gerald would target Jefferson High. Thomas hesitates. Then he says Gerald had a daughter who attended Jefferson High in the late 1990s. Her name was Caroline Hoffner. She died in a bus accident in 1999 when the brakes failed on a steep hill. The driver survived. Caroline and 2 other students did not. The school district settled with the families. Gerald's ex-wife received a payout. Gerald received nothing. He'd lost custody years earlier due to substance abuse. He blamed the school. He blamed the bus company. He blamed the driver. Thomas says Gerald wanted revenge, but also money. He says Gerald saw the field trip as an opportunity for both. The sheriff pulls the 1999 accident report. The bus that crashed was Bus 312. It was retired and scrapped in 2000. The driver was a man named Leonard Cose. Leonard left the district in 2001 and moved to Tennessee. The sheriff contacts him. Leonard is 70 now. He remembers the crash. He remembers Caroline. He says the brakes were inspected 2 weeks before and passed. He says the failure was sudden. He says he tried to steer into the hillside to slow down. He says it wasn't enough. He says he thinks about it every day. The sheriff asks if he ever encountered Gerald Prine. Leonard pauses. He says a man matching Gerald's description showed up at his house in 2002. He says the man accused him of killing Caroline deliberately. He says the man threatened to make him understand what it's like to lose control. Leonard says he called the police. The man left before they arrived. Leonard says he never saw him again. The team returns to Maple Lake. They expand the search radius. 200 feet from where they found the bus, a diver finds a rusted metal toolbox buried in silt. Inside, a hacksaw with a broken blade, a set of bolt cutters, and a waterproof pouch. The pouch contains a handwritten note on lined paper. The handwriting matches Carl's note from the bus. The note reads, "If the rear frame separates, let it sink. Current will carry it downstream. Front half will lodge at the drop-off. 12 shoes equal sign 12 witnesses. Sedative dose wears off in 4 hours. Church van arrives at 9:10. Reserve by noon. Photos time-stamped for morning. No one will ask questions if everyone is accounted for. Below that, Caroline. This is for you." The sheriff realizes the plan. Gerald intended to stage a controlled accident. He dosed the students and teacher with a mild sedative to cloud their short-term memory. He drove them onto County Road 9, knowing it was closed and prone to flooding after rain. He deliberately got the bus stuck in rising water. He told the students to remove their shoes to keep them dry, ensuring physical evidence would remain in the bus. He called Tom Rucker's church, using the pre-arranged contact. The van picked up the group and delivered them to the reserve hours later, allowing time for the sedative to diminish their recall. Gerald stayed behind to cut the rear half of the bus free, letting it sink into deeper water where it would be harder to find. He planned to file a claim for a tragic accident and disappear with the payout. But something went wrong. The bus sank faster than Gerald expected, or he miscalculated the current, or he couldn't cut through the frame in time. The front half lodged at a shallower depth. The rear half drifted and was never found. Gerald either drowned trying to complete the cut, or he escaped and abandoned the plan when he realized the bus was visible from the surface. Either way, he vanished. No claim was ever filed. No body was ever found. The sheriff searches the lake for 3 more days. The team finds no trace of the rear half of the bus. No sign of Gerald Prine. The current in Maple Lake flows east toward a narrow outlet that connects to a larger reservoir. It's possible the rear section drifted through the outlet and sank in deeper water. The reservoir is searched. Nothing is found. Mrs. Brennan and the students are offered counseling. Most decline. Ethan Cole says he's glad to finally know he wasn't imagining things. Maya Suresh says she always felt like something was missing from that day. Jacob Lindstrom says he wishes they'd spoken up in 2005. The sheriff tells them the sedative made that nearly impossible. He says their brains filled in gaps with plausible details. He says that's why some remembered the reserve clearly, while others remembered the detour. He says both memories were real, just not in the order they thought. The state reviews Jefferson High's substitute driver screening process. In 2005, background checks for short-term hires were minimal. Gerald used a fake social security number and a borrowed address. The system flagged nothing. The district updates its protocols. The DMV adds facial recognition for license renewals. Gerald's photo is circulated to law enforcement nationwide. No matches are found. In 2019, a fisherman on the reservoir reports seeing something yellow near the eastern shore, 20 feet down. A dive team investigates. They find the rear half of bus 447. The frame is intact but heavily corroded. Inside, rows of empty seats, a first aid kit, and a logbook. The logbook belongs to the bus company. The last entry is dated May 11, 2005, the day before the field trip. It's a maintenance note. Inspected all frame welds. Rear axle connection shows hairline fracture. Recommend full replacement before next use. Bus temporarily removed from service. The note is signed by a mechanic named Alan Frost. The sheriff contacts him. Alan is retired, living in Kentucky. He remembers that inspection. He says he red-tagged the bus and told the fleet manager it was unsafe. He says the manager told him the bus would be pulled from rotation immediately. Alan says he was shocked when he later heard bus 447 had been used for the field trip. He says he assumed the tag had been removed in error. He says he reported it to the company. He says they told him the trip had gone smoothly and no damage occurred, so no further action was needed. The sheriff pulls the fleet manager's employment records. The manager's name was Richard Salter. He left Jefferson High in 2006 and moved to Arizona. The sheriff tracks him down. Richard is 68 now. He says he doesn't remember red-tagging bus 447. He says if a bus was flagged for safety issues, it would have been taken out of service. The sheriff shows him Alan's signature on the logbook. Richard studies it. Then he admits he may have overlooked the tag. He says May 2005 was chaotic. 2 drivers quit, and they were short on vehicles. He says he might have cleared the bus for light use until a replacement part arrived. He says he never imagined it would end up in a lake. The hairline fracture explains how the bus split. The rear axle connection was already weak. When Gerald tried to cut the frame, the fracture widened under the stress of the current and the weight of the sinking vehicle. The rear section separated and drifted downstream. The front section, lighter and buoyant due to the air trapped in the engine compartment, settled at the drop-off point where Garrett Mills found it 12 years later. The forensic team makes one final discovery. In the rear section, wedged beneath a seat, they find a small vinyl wallet. Inside, a student ID for Caroline Hoffner, Jefferson High, 1998. 1999. The photo shows a girl with dark hair and a cautious smile. On the back, someone has written in pen, "You deserved better." The sheriff closes the case in 2020. Gerald Prine is presumed dead. Cause unknown. Location unknown. His daughter's wallet is returned to Gerald's ex-wife. She declines to comment. Tom Rucker, Sir. Quote, Say's family releases a statement expressing regret for his unwitting involvement. Is not charged. His contact with Gerald occurred before any crime was committed, and there's no evidence he knew Gerald's plan. Mrs. Brennan retires from teaching permanently. She gives one interview to a local paper. She says she's grateful no one was seriously harmed. She says she wishes she'd questioned things more on that day. She says she'll never stop wondering what Gerald was thinking in those final moments, whether he believed he was honoring his daughter or just settling a score that could never be settled. The 12 pairs of shoes are stored in the county evidence facility. They will remain there until 2045, when the statute of limitations for any potential civil claims expires. After that, they will be destroyed per protocol. But for now, they sit in a sealed box, size 6 sneakers with names written in permanent marker, proof that 23 students took off their shoes on a sinking bus and walked through rising water to safety, even if most of them couldn't remember it until someone found the bus and asked the right questions. Was it revenge, desperation, or something else that made Gerald Prine dose a bus full of kids and sink it in a lake 7 miles off course?